Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be going over potential tropical cyclone 9. So this is around your Bahamas and Turks and Caicos area. It's just moving out of the Turks and Caicos Islands, and you can see how it's right here. It's a pretty broad area of a lot of moisture, and it is getting closer to the Bahamas. It's a little slow, but it is definitely making its move. It's not extremely slow, but it is going to start moving, and we do actually have some tropical storm watches over parts of the Bahamas, especially parts of the eastern Bahamas, and you can see how close it is to the Florida coast, even throwing some moisture, not directly from the system, but possibly a little bit of moisture coming off of the system, bringing some storms across parts of Florida, but it's nothing like too direct, like from the very middle. But today this has strengthened. This was an invest. Now it's a potential tropical cyclone at 30 miles an hour. So we definitely are thinking this could turn into a tropical storm. We're just thinking tropical storm, but it could become a hurricane if it doesn't touch land. It could make something like a Dorian track, which is very possible, which I will show in a second. So there is a lot of factors that will go into this to see how intense will the storm get. We're still kind of trying to figure that out, but we will have to figure that out pretty quickly because this isn't as slow as Dorian was. So we do need to people in Florida get prepared, Georgia get prepared, South Carolina get prepared. If you're in Florida, you should be pretty good, or maybe even Georgia, but most likely Florida. You didn't see the worst impacts. Well, pretty much you didn't see the worst impacts there. Really, if you're anywhere along a lot of the southeast coast, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, you were prepared for Dorian and you didn't get the worst of the impacts. You did get some impacts, but you didn't get the worst of it. So you actually do have some materials where, like for a week later when you did get a new system to come through. So you already do have some stuff to help you out, and you don't have to spend money on it. But if you're in North Carolina, that's kind of a different story. They had a direct impact. They'll probably have to, a lot of people might have to evacuate if we do see it to come back, but that's still something we're watching right now. But we're going to go ahead and get into part of the National Hurricane Center. So here is what we're looking at right now. Now you can see this has by next week it getting towards the Florida area. So you can see we do actually have quite a bit to go. It's moving at northwest at 8 miles an hour. So once again, as I did say, it's not, especially like really slow, which is a really good thing. It's not too slow, but it's in the ocean possibly until, I didn't mean to say 2 p.m. Tuesday. By your Saturday, it can develop until your Saturday. I don't know why I said Tuesday. By your Saturday, this has to develop. So we will definitely have to watch this. So this has about 2 days to develop into something. Right now, we're just thinking of a tropical storm. Now, right now, it's looking like a landfall in Florida is possible. But you can see this area off of Florida, just like we have with Dorian. So there definitely is a possibility it could go along the Florida coast and do something like this and become something stronger. That's kind of what the European model is doing last time I did check. So this is the first advisory, so we still have a long way to go. But you can see there's the possibility it could enter the Gulf for a brief moment and then go, strengthen a little bit, then make landfall in Florida. But we are expecting, we're not really expecting it to go off anywhere across here. We were yesterday, maybe, very early this morning, but it kind of did take that shift, kind of like Dorian did, but, a little quicker. But we do, of course, have those tropical storm watches over parts of the Bahamas. And I am expecting us probably to get some across Florida over the next day. And the tropical storm, of course, these tropical storm watches are in the Bahamas. If it turns into a tropical storm when it's in the Bahamas, as you can see, this has it as a depression. So we will definitely have to watch. So right now we're just expecting a tropical storm. And if you were to look at some of the wind speed probabilities, we do have a 50-50 chance right now of getting some tropical storm force winds across the Bahamas and Florida. So there's a pretty good chance we could definitely see them. But if we were to look at this right here, if we wanted to look at the exact, wind speeds that they are projecting right now, we definitely could through the interactive map if this does speed up a little bit. But we're gonna go ahead and try to do that if this does speed up. Sorry, I haven't used this computer all day, so it's kind of having to keep up. Trying to get started up a little bit. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's starting to get started up. Okay, so you can see across parts of here. Yeah, here we go. You can see across parts of this map. So you can see how this has as a tropical depression through the Bahamas. It looks like all the Bahamas are definitely under that that tropical storm watch. I think there is a bit of the Bahamas that are not, as you can see. But if we were to look towards landfall, this has it getting to around 50 miles an hour. So, this has the window of opportunity to get a little stronger. But right now, it's saying 50 miles an hour at landfall. So nothing too significant. But there is definitely the possibility that it does stay off the coast and strengthens a little bit, strengthens into a hurricane potentially, and then it keeps going up the coast and it does something like this, which could mean we have a hurricane landfall and maybe in parts of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, once again, maybe another North Carolina landfall. So we definitely are going to have to watch. This looks a lot like Dorian. But right now this has it making landfall in parts of Florida, and then it has it moving into northern Florida at 35 miles an hour as a tropical depression. So a quick tropical depression, and then you can see how it kind of just goes into Georgia and then goes off the coast. So this is where we may see another window of opportunity for development. So even though part of this is, has it, part of this does definitely have it going over land. But you can see there's this window for opportunity, which is our best spot. But you can see how it does go back off land, and it could potentially go up towards here and maybe become a tropical storm or low-wind hurricane, which we're having to watch out for. So there's kind of a lot we're looking into right now. But right now we're just expecting a tropical storm landfall in Florida, but we're going to have to see. I'm not fully convinced yet, which you will see why in a minute, but I'm not fully convinced, but we'll definitely have to see. You could see South Carolina, Georgia, all of Florida are in the cone. Maybe even parts of southeastern North Carolina are already in the cone. So we're definitely gonna have to watch out for track changes possibly in the next day or two, because this is getting really close to landfall. So we won't have much time to prepare. Good thing is, as I did say, a lot of people in Florida, maybe in South Carolina, are prepared since Dorian just did come through. But this could stack up on some problems that were there. Maybe some poor, maybe we're just starting to get some of the, rivers to go down or whatever you want to say, and maybe it's going to start rising again before it could go down. So that's kind of the concern. Some minor flooding definitely could happen, but we will definitely have to see how much moisture this does bring. But right now, this has it making landfall in Florida, then quickly going down to a tropical depression, then going out into the Atlantic Ocean. And it's anyone's guess from there, but it's really anyone's guess if it'll hit Florida or not. Okay, if we look at the spaghetti models, here you can see this is your 18Z outlook. So, as you can see from what the National Hurricane Center is saying, so this kind of gives you, just kind of shows you why they're saying this right now. Now you can see how a lot of these models are taking it something like this. So that's why their cone's looking like that. Now you can see a few of these models are going off into the Gulf, which is, definitely a possibility, but it's not looking very likely at all. But you can see how a lot of these do have it making landfall in Florida, going into Georgia, maybe even South Carolina, then moving out. Now there definitely is the possibility that it gets a little stronger, and whatever is steering this system can't steer it as good, and it does keep that northern path, which is all, it's kind of what only two of these models are saying it, but sometimes when you only get 2 models to say it, that's what happened with Dorian. We saw 2 models saying it would take this track, and it did. So we definitely do have to watch throughout the next few days of what does happen. But right now, it's looking like what the National Hurricane Center was saying. It should go through Florida, Georgia, make landfall in Florida, of course, as a tropical storm, hit Georgia as a tropical depression, and then leave out into the Atlantic Ocean. And we don't see anything else from that. We will definitely have to see. But if we were to look right now, if we were to go ahead and look at your intensity guidance, so as we were saying, it could be a tropical storm at landfall. Now you can see some of these keep it as a tropical depression, which I'm not expecting, but you can see how a lot of them do take it up to this tropical storm strength and kind of top it off around your 55 to 60. But you can see how some of them do take it up to your Category 1 strength hurricane. So this is never a good sign, seeing some models taking it up to a hurricane. Of course, that is never a good sign. Some of them are getting really close, pushing it. That's kind of the concern when it comes to this, but we're going to have to watch if this can become a hurricane. If, it's going in these very, very favorable conditions for development. We have really warm water, so I would not be surprised if this gets a little stronger than what we're thinking right now. But right now, we have our best guess out there, and we're just going to have to see how this does develop in the next day or two. Okay, if we were to look at windy.com once again, we're going to look at the European model. We're going to look at where the European model has this storm going. So you can see right now how most of the moisture is, not on any land. We're not really seeing any direct impacts. We did see some impacts of just some rain across the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos going on still. Turks and Caicos, you are seeing some. Now they're kind of moving a little bit more into the Bahamas, where our big concern is, because the Bahamas is pretty much flattened, and, it's pretty much, it's still there, the islands are, but pretty much, there's nothing there. So if you were to look at this, you can see how this does go back over the Bahamas. We see something to go over the Bahamas. Now, the key thing is, I know the Bahamas don't weaken systems that well, just because it's really flat land. You really don't get it to get that much of, it doesn't give it that punch that it needs. But the question is, if this was to go north of the Bahamas, we could say that 5 miles an hour that it could get rid of. So, just these minor details could change some forecasts in this system. So we definitely are going to have to see this does have it going straight over the Bahamas, and you can see how we would get direct impacts coming in. Now, you can see how much rain it does bring. You can imagine the wind gust. Look at these wind gusts, maybe possible wind gusts of anywhere from, this model has it getting near 50 miles an hour, some wind gusts with this system, which is a little bit of an understatement, possibly, when it comes to wind gusts. Now, sustained winds, I would say that could be our sustained winds, but that we're still going to have to wait and see. But you can see by Saturday night, this has it getting really close to Florida, north of the Bahamas, kind of what Dorian was doing. So this was almost exactly like Dorian as it was moving out of the Bahamas. And you can see the Grand Island of the Bahamas were, still getting rain, where we were mostly affected, where it sat right over you. But you can see how the storm does start to intensify. The eastern side, of course, is the biggest part. So we definitely are going to have to see how strong this does get. Florida, you'd be on the western side again, so definitely some rough surf. Definitely some impacts could be coming, but, remember, you have to remember from last time, we didn't see the worst impacts because you're on that western side. But if we were to keep going, you can see how this stays right along the coast. There's some really tough surf impacts. So we definitely are good to watch. Maybe even that western eye wall getting really close. If this was to shift west a little bit, we could see some worse impacts across Florida. Now, across Florida, definitely some severe weather on those outer bands. Some wind gusts coming in, some rain, but that's all this is really showing. But if we were to keep going, you can see how it stays right along the southeast coast, and it does strengthen as it is doing this, as Dorian didn't intensify that much. But this definitely could. This would be Humberto. It looks like Humberto, but I'm pretty sure it's Humberto. So just for anyone that was wondering if I ever do say that, this could be Humberto. I think the H is silent, or it's just at the very beginning. But anyway, you can see on your Tuesday this does keep going. It's off the South Carolina coast, a little bit farther. A little bit far, so we may not see direct impacts there, or maybe this one doesn't really have many going on there. Definitely that rough surf along the southeast coast is the biggest concern for a lot of the southeast coast. But you can see this really does strengthen right here. A big storm. I'm going to say storm. It could be a hurricane. It could be a tropical storm. And you can see how this is really big. But you think, oh, okay, good, it's going off. That's what the Hurricane Center was saying. But then you see this, it kind of takes that turn, which is our worst possibility. One of my friends at school today was saying, what if it just went out in the ocean and then came back towards the west and, hit somewhere else along the U.S.? And I said that definitely could happen. And then I was looking at this, and I thought he may actually be right. You can see how this does have it steering left or west, and you can see how it does have it getting really close to the North Carolina coast. But if we were to keep looking, North Carolina coast, you may not be affected the most. But you can see our biggest concern could be a northeast storm. Now this is what this is saying, this could definitely change, but this has it hitting a direct impact across parts of the Northeast. So New York City, Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, along Long Island, New Jersey. If you live anywhere across there, this is where we could be seeing maybe a tropical storm coming through, maybe a hurricane. We'd have to see. But you can see how it does bring impacts across here. Parts of coastal Maine, you're seeing some impacts. Nova Scotia, another one coming through. Dorian came through at 100 miles an hour winds. It was pretty bad. Also, in Newfoundland, you were hit pretty bad. So even parts of Canada have been hit pretty bad from some tropical systems. And then you look behind that and we see something else. So you can see how the Atlantic is really heating up this year. Nothing to joke around with, because you can see behind that we do have some activity off of the coast of Africa still going on. So there's these little tropical waves that have been coming off and coming off. And this is definitely going to be pretty bad if this does happen. Now, this would be biggest impacts for the Northeast, worst case scenario for them. Now, across the Southeast coast, we'd have to see what our impacts would be. But you can see the big bulk of the rain would be 16 to 18 inches. So if this was to move west a little bit, we would see huge impacts across the Southeast. But you can see biggest rainfall across the whole Southeast coast would be 1 to 3 inches at max. Now you can see some of those outer bands coming in definitely could change it up a little bit. If you get those thunderstorms in the outer bands that drop a little bit more rain than the other one, that definitely can happen. But across the Georgia coast and the South Carolina coast, very minimal impacts with this. And you can see across D.C. maybe 0.2 of an inch, Virginia Beach maybe 2 inches. So out of the whole Southeast coast, you might be the one that gets the most rain. But still, that's only 2 inches, so we will definitely have to watch. Now you can see coastal New Jersey maybe 1 to 2 inches, maybe a little less in New York. And you can see close to an inch in New York. Now you can see across coastal Massachusetts, we see anywhere from 3 to maybe even 4 inches. Boston around 2 inches. So 2 to 4 inches actually is what I should say, and that's kind of what we're watching. So still no, very huge impacts from rain with this model run, but you do have to remember this definitely will change. So there is definitely the possibility that it could move a little bit more inland, and we see something like this. And, you never know. We could see something happening. I meant to do that. We could see multiple landfalls, which is definitely still a possibility with some of these models that we were looking at, which is still definitely a big possibility that could definitely happen. But you can see a lot of these models do take that eastern turn, and it looks like a lot of them don't come back. Now, you can see how some of them do have a little bit of a sign of that. Now, you can see some of them take a little, you cannot see it too greatly. But, here's one example. You can kind of see a little bit of a turn, but that's the one that doesn't even take it near land. So there's a lot of big possibilities. We could see anywhere from a Florida landfall towards the Georgia coast to the South Carolina coast to the North Carolina coast, or we could see a Florida landfall to Georgia, parts of South Carolina, then straight offshore. Or we could see a Florida, Georgia, parts of South Carolina landfall, goes off and then steers back and hits North Carolina and the Northeast. Or there's the possibility that it does some kind of track like Dorian did, but a little bit of a different one, and it kind of does something like this and then goes up into the Northeast, different than Dorian. But Dorian did something similar after North Carolina. They did affect but it did affect parts of Massachusetts and coastal Maine. So we definitely are going to have to see, could this be a northeast system with our biggest impact, or will it be a southeast system? So there's that big question of what's going to happen. But either way, I do want to tell everyone, if you're anywhere across the whole East Coast, so if you're anywhere across here, if you're anywhere across the whole East Coast, be on alert when it does come to this system, because there definitely is a lot of changes that could be happening from this little bit of a, if you were to look at a map, you wouldn't really care about that. Now, you look at it right now, but later on it could be bigger. Now, so if you're anywhere across here, that little bit of a system could be affecting anyone across this area, even Nova Scotia, even, parts over in the Newfoundland, and also the Bahamas you're being affected. So if you're really anywhere in here, I would even extend that a little bit. If you're anywhere in there, be on alert for, not Dorian, Humberto that could be coming through, because this is a main concern for the next week. So we will definitely have to watch out. And there's some stuff after that I've been watching. So This could turn out to be a historic season if we keep getting these tropical waves to come through. I was very concerned for a historic season just because we did get that neutral pattern to come in, from the Pacific Ocean that turned into that neutral pattern, which kind of weakened our upper level wind shear that does affect the Atlantic usually during an El Nino. So we're not really seeing as much of that. We still are seeing some, but not much in the way of that. And it's in very favorable conditions right now. So really, if you're anywhere across the East Coast, be ready for impacts wherever you are. Just the main East Coast is what I'm concerned about. Inland is still definitely a concern, but not my not my biggest concern right now. But yeah, guys, I hope y'all did enjoy today's video. If you did, consider subscribing and leaving a like down below. I'll be covering this probably for another week if this does do this.